point.
So the answer is no, you haven't costed the possibility of these people because fine, retired people. There's not 2.2 million retired British people on the Costa del Sol.
No, well, actually,
even if under half and do, that's 1 million people. And the answer, can you give an honest answer? Have you costed that as a possibility?
I don't really understand. Are you saying that if Britain's relationship with Europe becomes one of cooperation and trade, that the 1.2 million people who live in Europe with British passports would all have to come home? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying you need to acknowledge, in the same way that you've been telling everybody that there's millions of people ready to come over the border for the past 5 years, it's a very real possibility. If you put up barriers to Europe and you say to European countries their people can no longer come here unless they hit a load of criteria, that those same European countries will say, well, if you're no longer in the EU, your people have to meet the same criteria here. I don't see, and I think the simple answer is no, you haven't costed that.
Well, let's throw that about a bit. There's 316,000 British people in Spain, and I think the point is if we were to leave the EU and introduce a visa system, we're talking about some.
Well, they're a great benefit to Spain, aren't they? Because they're there.
Golf clubs down and come home.
They're spending their money.
Anyone on that? There's a lady at the back. Hello, Fiona. Hi.
Yes, hello. Well, I was just thinking that you've actually answered your problem with immigrants coming in because you're going to enable in your manifesto people to discriminate against employing them. So we don't have to employ immigrants if we don't want to.
Well, what I said was that small companies should be able to presume in favour of employing British people without fearing the law, that's all.
Discrimination?
Well, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that we should try to look after British workers first, if we possibly can. I think that's a very sensible, rational thing to say.
I have a question.
Koji, I'll come to you in a second, actually. Allow me to throw it to Koji, because he's not been in here, and it's very gracious of you. Thank you. Koji, on you go.
I do realise the point you were making in the Trevor Phillips's Channel 4 documentary was that employers should be able to have a preference for British workers. But you were asked a very specific question, which was, will there be discrimination on the grounds of race or nationality? And your answer was, no, we're not colourblind.
I'll tell you what was interesting. So it was really interesting is that before that programme went out, there was a huge furore that I'd said something really beastly. When the programme was shown in full, there was no debate or argument at all. What I said was, in UKIP, we don't have quotas, we don't have female quotas or racial quotas. People in our party get on according to ability. And that was what... I wasn't suggesting overhauling Acts of Parliament to go back to the mid-90s.
It's a shame you only had one black face in your manifesto, though, wasn't it?
Well, in fact, there were two. But
sorry.
Sorry. So be careful. Be careful. But no, I mean, honestly, all I suggested was that small employers should be allowed to presume in favour of employing British people. And the point I made was that actually the biggest losers in the job market, with the open door we've had since 2004, have been black British, particularly in London, where youth unemployment in that community is now 50%.
Yeah, back to you, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So the British Social Attitude Survey showed, I believe it was last year, that racial prejudice is in the rise in British society. So if that's the case, and if you said, as in quote, that your party is colorblind, how do you plan on combating this rise in racial prejudice when you can't see race because you're colorblind?
Well, the racial prejudice actually these days, or the growth, if those surveys are right, I don't think it's anything to do with colour at all, and anything to do with race either. I think it is about nationality, and I think one of the things I hear travelling around the country are people who say, look, we've always been very open-minded, we've always been tolerant, we always think Britain had dealt with immigration so much better than Germany or France or anywhere else, but we're feeling uncomfortable about the change that's happened in our town over the last 10 years.
But
well, I think it's very interesting, though, that a lot of people do feel uncomfortable with a change in their communities.
What do you mean by it?
But it's not. Well, it's not about colour of skin.
No,
it's about nationality.
Are you uncomfortable with the tone that Mr. Farage takes?
No, not at the moment. But I do feel very much, and it's very much in social media at the moment. I believe that a lot of bigoted attitudes are coming out, and I think that UKIP is enabling it. Since you started campaigning in the area that I am, Thanet South, people are feeling very uncomfortable about walking about in the area, because there really is this vitriolic, xenophobic feeling, and a lot of the people that you seem to be attracting are from the far right. It is, Nigel,
The
and
vitriol,
it's very uncomfortable.
All right, Nigel Farage.
The vitriol comes from a campaign funded by the trade union movement, and it is an attempt in what should be a free democratic election to shout down those who have different views. That I think is appalling.
I was potentially going to have someone spray links at me the other night in his effort to ethnic cleanse me.
Well, I don't know.
This is one of your followers.
Well, I think that is one of the most outrageous.
It is outrageous.
That is one of the most outrageous things
but Nigel,
anybody has ever said to me.
Is attracting that, and it's opening up.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
And then I'm going to come to Tracy, because Tracy, I believe you're a UKIP supporter. But let me, Nigel Farage first.
This is truly outrageous.
It is.
The violence.
It is.
No, I'm sorry.
The violence. The violence, the damage, the intimidation. I can tell you about one person in Thanet South, a serving councillor and a very decent man, whose property has been vandalised now 3 times in the space of the last month. And I want to make this point to you. We are a non-racist, non-sectarian political party. We have an increasing number of black and ethnic minority candidates, members, supporters and voters. And I've made it clear that the far right, the BNP or the EDL, I don't even allow them to be members of UKIP.
Every day we see on the media something else spewing out that is bigoted against women, against...
I'm sorry, that is completely outrageous.
Tracy's dying to come in.
Is it more to
Are you a
do
UKIP
with...
supporter, Tracy?
I have been in the past, yes. I'm floating at the moment.
First of all,
is it more to do with religion? Because the religious views, there's a big thing about Muslims and an anti-feeling about Muslims. Is it more about the religious side or the immigration side?
What are you saying here?
The growth of people being uncomfortable.
Well, yes.
And let's come to you, Mark, another UKIP supporter.
I'm a UKIP supporter, and I've changed to UKIP. And
from where?
I voted Lib Dem last time, and in the past, a long time ago, I voted Tory. But I haven't got any racist views or whatever. I've joined UKIP because I feel passionately about what you believe in, and I believe that this country needs to actually look at itself and how we're going to resource ageing population, how we're going to fund this, how we're going to fund that, and that's where the focus needs to be. I'm not a racist. I'm not someone who will go around and spray paint on people on doors, and it really irritates me when I hear people talk like that, because I'm a UKIP supporter, but I would not put myself in that category whatsoever. So why am I being labelled as a bigot, this, that and the other? It really irritates me.
OK, Brian, I haven't heard from you.
And me.
Thank you.
Hi. Good morning. Brian Woods, I'm Vice Chair of Surrey and West Sussex Regional FSB, and I'm interested to hear your comments about who employers should be able to employ. I got mixed messages. I think you said that employers need to employ British people before other immigrants, whether they're European or wherever. And then you said should, and I believe the choice should be with the employer.
We dealt with this a few minutes ago.
The best candidate is but we've moved on from it.
You're moving it back.
Well,
that's fine. That's fine.
Right. The answer to your question is, I'm the one person trying to fight the corporate takeover of this country and our economy and indeed our politics. And what I see is a whole framework now, coming mostly from Brussels, that favours the big and disadvantages the small. And we've got about 5 million men and women in Britain who, despite the difficulties, are still running small businesses. Some are sole traders, some are small employers. And, 60% of the employment in the private sector are people who are FSB-type companies. And I want the burden of regulation at all levels lifted off their shoulders.
We'll come a little bit later on to the issue of the European Union, I am sure. Thank you all very much so far. Thank you very much for that, Brian, and everybody for some excellent questions and conversations. 0500 909 693. More calls to come. Just very briefly, this idea you've got about having the most popular e-petitions or the most popular petitions on the government website to have a referendum on if anything reaches over 2 million, you would have a referendum on the most popular.
Yeah.
I mean, Clarkson was halfway there.
Well, I think it's...
I mean,
well,
would the Queen... Would that be in the Queen's speech?
Hang on a
you
second.
know?
Hang on a second. Jeremy Clarkson had a contract with the BBC. Nothing Parliament had any say over at all, so that's irrelevant.
No, I'm just talking about popularity for
that's
causes.
No,
you know.
actually, I think that, you know, to get 2 million properly registered signatures of people who are happy for their names to be published, to say they're behind this, is a very difficult thing to do. What I do think, though, is there is this disconnect very often between the political class and how ordinary people feel. And the Swiss have a system where if they're unhappy with what their government's doing, they can call them to account by holding a referendum. And what we're suggesting is that the British people have, and really, I think it could be enormously popular. I mean, just look. Whatever you think of the Scottish
Bring
debates,
Black Clarkson was 1,059,104
but that's irrelevant because that's not legislative. Just look. I mean, whatever you think of the arguments, the referendum in Scotland, energised politics, saw a turnout of 86%, which is even higher than general elections here in the 50s and 60s. So I think our ability to call a referendum on a key issue, I think the British public would love it.
Can I just ask what happens to UKIP if we vote to stay in the European Union?
Oh, I'll tell you what, let's hold that thought.
Wow, what an interesting thought.
Let's hold that thought. Let's hold that interesting thought.
Why?
We will come back. We will come back. Listen, it gives you 5 or 6 minutes to think of an answer.
I don't need to think about it.
I know you don't. I know you don't. It's not like you haven't been asked that one before. We've got some unemployment figures coming up as well. It's 9:33. It's Friday Takeover. It's the questions from the audience. The audience really set the agenda this week. We're talking to Nigel Farage, the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party. Some great questions from the audience so far. If they were a candidate, I would vote for them. Give yourselves a round of applause for what you've done so far. You've been terrific. You know, unlike you last night, I know how to win an audience over. There, Mr. Farage.
It depends on the material you're dealing with, doesn't it?
Got to be nice to the audience. No, listen, before you go any further, you'll be interested in this. You will all be interested in this. We got the job figures. Adam from Wake Up to Money. Adam, what's the news?
Nikki, two lots of figures we've got here. One is about employment, one is about wages. So we'll kick off with the wages, which are up by 1.8% if you exclude bonuses, 1.7% if you include them. And of course, this coming at a time when inflation is running at 0. So in real terms, people's average pay packet is getting better. But some very interesting facts around unemployment as well. Now it's down to 5.6%. They've knocked 76,000. There's 1.84 million people unemployed. But 31 and a bit million people in work. 73.4% of the workforce. Why am I throwing these statistics at you? Because that is the highest on record over 40 years of comparable record. And this percentage of people who are actually in work is the highest since records began back in 1971.
And a big tick from Madame Christine for the economy. Just briefly give us that line.
Yeah, she's the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. 24 hours ago, the IMF had a bit of a pop at the projections for the UK economy and said that they thought by the end of the next parliament that the budget would still be in deficit rather than in surplus. Now we have Christine Lagarde saying that actually she thinks that the present coalition government have done a good job of running the UK economy in difficult times.
It's Christine Lagarde. Thanks, Adam. Is Christine Lagarde right? Nigel Farage?
It sounds a bit like the old PALS Act, doesn't it, between international statesmen. Look, we've got growth in the economy. Good. We're seeing wages go up a little bit after years of them not going up. Good. Yeah, true. But how's it happening? It's happening because we're running budget deficit financing on a truly massive scale. You know, if you all go out and max out your credit cards for the next 3 months, your lifestyles will improve. That there's no doubt, but you've got to pay the bill back. And we are. I mean, the most astonishing economic figure, I think, from the last 5 years is this: when George Osborne became Chancellor, our national debt was £850 billion. It is now £1.5 trillion. So our repayments